There are sounds you never forget. The laugh of a child, the voice of your mother calling you home, the final words of someone you've lost. I never imagined that the sound to mark the dividing line of my life would be my own daughter's voice, carried through a phone, cold and unrecognizable. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon, so you never miss a story like this one. It was late, well past midnight, when the notification buzzed. I had been sitting at my kitchen table, shuffling through old recipe cards for no reason other than to calm myself. I thought it would be Samantha reminding me of our brunch next week, or perhaps a note about the grandkids I dreamed she might one day give me. Instead, what spilled from the speaker was a stranger's tone hidden inside my daughter's voice. "Victor," she said, crisp as glass, "I can't stand having my mother here anymore. She's useless, and Paula says the transfer papers will be ready soon. By next month, she'll be in Havenwood, and the house will be ours." My breath caught. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, as though the walls of the kitchen could be lying to me. But the words were real, precise, cruel. My daughter, my Samantha, was plotting not just to move me out, but to erase me. The teacup in my hand trembled until I set it down. I had scrubbed houses for years, worked at the library by day and cleaned offices by night, just to keep this roof over us. Every brick, every bill, every late-night story I read to Samantha beneath this roof was bought with hours of sweat and sacrifice. Now the very child I had raised with those sacrifices was treating me as a burden to be filed away. I replayed the message, once, twice, 3 times. Each time my heart cracked anew, and yet the more I listened, the less I cried, and the more I began to see something else. A plan. They thought I was too old, too soft, too weak to notice. But I had been underestimated before, and survived. I walked through the dark house, my slippers whispering against the floorboards. Photographs lined the walls. Samantha on her first day of kindergarten, her golden dress at prom, her college graduation. Each photo was proof of the life I had poured into her. Proof that the woman plotting against me was the same girl who once clutched my hand and begged me not to let go on her first day at school. But now she had let go of me. Entirely. At dawn, I rose before the sun. My body felt different. Heavier with grief. Lighter with clarity. I bathed, dressed with deliberate care in my best navy skirt and crisp blouse, pinned my mother's pearl brooch to my chest. If Samantha thought I was a fading shadow, then she would see me instead as iron sharpened by betrayal. I gathered my papers, the deed, insurance, savings passbook, my diary of daily notes, into a leather folder. Each document was a fragment of my life, and together they would become my defense. Outside, the world was still quiet, the sky just blushing with dawn. I stood at the threshold of my home, the house they planned to take from me, and laid my palm against the doorframe. "Not yet," I whispered, as though the house itself needed reassurance. "You're still mine." Then I walked into the morning, carrying nothing but my folder and a fire inside me that no betrayal could extinguish. Because I knew one thing with perfect clarity. My daughter thought I was too old to fight. She had forgotten who raised her. Sleep did not come to me after that night. I lay in bed with the phone beside me, replaying Samantha's voice until the words carved themselves into my bones. Betrayal doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It creeps in, quiet as ivy, winding around the corners of memory until you realize too late that the walls have been strangled. As I stared at the ceiling, I began to see the past not as a collection of tender sacrifices, but as breadcrumbs leading to this moment. The signs had been there, subtle at first, then bolder, until the voice message only confirmed what I had not wanted to admit. I remember when Samantha was still small, her hair in unruly braids, her knees scabbed from climbing trees. I worked double shifts at the library and still took in side jobs, mending old books for private collectors, just to pay for her uniforms. She once looked up at me after a spelling bee, clutching her ribbon, and whispered, "I'll make you proud one day, Mom." I believed her. Every hour I bent my back for her, every piece of jewelry I pawned, every dress I wore until the fabric thinned, all of it was for her. Love, to me, meant sacrifice. But love, I learned too late, doesn't always breed gratitude. Sometimes it breeds entitlement. The first hints came years ago. Samantha had married Victor, and at first, I was relieved. He seemed attentive, eager to provide, the kind of man who could give my daughter the stability I had struggled to build alone. But stability soured quickly when Victor lost a job, and debts mounted like storm clouds. "Mum, it's just a small loan," Samantha told me over tea one evening. Her voice was soft, but her eyes avoided mine. "We'll pay you back as soon as we can." One loan became two, 1,000 here, 2,500 there. I convinced myself it was temporary. I convinced myself they were grateful. But when the repayments never came, and instead I saw new furniture in their apartment, a suspicion flickered, quickly smothered by hope. Then came the subtle erosion of respect. At a birthday gathering, Victor teased me, calling me forgetful Eleanor when I misplaced the cake knife. Everyone laughed, including Samantha. I forced a smile, but inside, something stung. Later, at dinner, she reached across the table to take my checkbook. "Mom, let me handle this. Numbers aren't easy at your age." Her tone was light, almost playful, but I noticed the way Victor smirked. I told myself it was concern. I told myself she was trying to help. But now, in the harsh light of betrayal, I see it differently. They weren't offering to lighten my burdens. They were rehearsing for the day they would claim control. Even the neighbors noticed things before I did. Teresa Monroe, who had lived next door for nearly 40 years, stopped me once at the mailbox. "Your Samantha's been spending a lot of time with Paula Denton," she said, her brow furrowed. Odd pair, those two. Always whispering when I passed by, I shrugged it off then. Paula had been in Samantha's high school circle, and though she had always struck me as sly, I thought their friendship harmless. I told Teresa not to worry. But deep down, something unsettled me. And now, after hearing that message, Teresa's warning clanged in my memory like a church bell. The exclusions began next. They stopped inviting me to family outings, telling me I'd be too tired, or that it was just a quick thing with friends. When I found out through a neighbor that they had thrown a party without telling me, I swallowed the hurt and convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. Then the comments grew sharper. "Mum, you've been misplacing things again," Samantha said one afternoon after I forgot where I'd left my keys. "Victor and I worry about you living alone." "I didn't misplace them," I replied softly. "I left them on the hall table." Her smile was patient. Too patient. "Of course, Mom. If you say so." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. The tone one uses with a child spinning fairy tales. The memory that burns brightest came just weeks before the voice message. I had baked Victor's favorite lemon pie and carried it to their apartment as a surprise. When I knocked, I heard laughter inside, the kind that rolls easily between people who share secrets. It took them several minutes to open the door. Papers were scattered across the table, Paula standing with a folder in her hands. When I entered, she stuffed the papers away with a brittle smile. "Oh, Mrs. Price," she said too sweetly. "Just helping Samantha with some insurance forms." But I had glimpsed my own name on one of those pages. My name. When I asked about it, Samantha's reply was smooth, almost rehearsed. "Oh, Mom, we were updating beneficiaries. You know, just in case I wanted to believe her." So I did. Against my better judgment, against Teresa's suspicions, against the knot forming in my chest, I chose trust. Now I know that was the first real crack. Walking through my house that morning, after hearing her voice in that message, every memory came flooding back. Every dismissal, every omission, every gentle word laced with control. They hadn't started betraying me with the message. The message was only the mask ripped away. I stood before the mirror in my hallway, my reflection lit by dawn. Wrinkles carved the story of decades across my skin, but my eyes burned steady. I saw not a frail woman, not the forgetful mother they painted me as, but someone forged by sacrifice. Samantha believed she was clever, that she could rewrite my story to suit her own convenience. But I had lived 64 years in this world. I had survived abandonment, poverty, and nights when I wondered how I would keep a roof over her head. If she thought I would surrender now, then she had forgotten the first lesson I ever taught her. Never underestimate the strength of the woman who raised you. The morning after that voice message, I sat at my kitchen table long after the coffee in my cup had gone cold. My mind felt clear, sharper than it had in years. Betrayal has a way of burning the fog away. Suddenly, every detail, every word, every look from the past took on new meaning. I knew what Samantha and Victor were building. A story. A narrative about a confused old woman, forgetful, incapable, in need of guardianship. They would whisper it to neighbors, to friends, to doctors, until it seemed true. And if no one questioned it, they could use that story as a weapon to take everything I had. So my first step had to be undeniable proof. Proof that I was not slipping. Proof that my mind was sound. Not for myself, I had no doubts. But for the courts, the banks, the records, the very paper they sought to twist against me. I called the hospital that morning and asked for Nurse Clara James. I'd met her a year earlier when she'd checked my blood pressure at a community health fair. She had been patient then, answering my endless questions without condescension. Something about her steady gaze told me she was the kind of woman who saw people, not just charts. When she answered the phone, I spoke quietly. "Clara, it's Eleanor Price. I need a full evaluation. Not tomorrow. Not next week." Today, there was a pause. Then her voice softened. "Of course, Mrs. Price. Come in this afternoon. I'll make time." The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish. I walked down its bright corridors with my leather folder tucked against my chest. Each step echoed in my ears like a vow. I would not give Samantha and Victor the satisfaction of calling me confused. Clara met me at the intake desk, her hair pulled back, her eyes calm but curious. She guided me into a small, windowless room furnished with 2 chairs and a clipboard. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I hesitated, then told her. Not everything, not the betrayal in all its ugliness, but enough. My daughter's whispers of forgetfulness, Victor's jokes at my expense, the sense that they were building a case against me. Clara listened without interruption, her pen hovering but not moving. When I finished, she closed the folder. "Let's begin." The tests came one by one. Dates and times, names of recent presidents, recall of a short story, she asked, me to count backward from 100 by sevens, to repeat strings of numbers, to draw a clock face showing a specific time. I answered each task with a calm certainty. My years at the library had trained my mind to catalogue, to order, to recall details most people forgot. Even in retirement, I kept my journals, lists, and notes. My memory was not a burden, it was my weapon. Clara gave me a faint smile after each section, but her expression remained professional. Only at the end, when she set her pen down, did her features soften. "Mrs. Price," she said, "you scored perfectly. You're sharper than half the nurses here, myself included." Relief washed over me, but it was more than relief. It was validation. Proof that the narrative Samantha and Victor wanted to spin was nothing but smoke. Clara printed the results, signed and stamped them with the hospital's seal. She handed me 2 copies. "Keep one safe at home," she instructed. "Give the other to your lawyer, if you have one." "I don't," I admitted. "Not yet." "Then find one. And be careful. I've seen this before. Families eager to move elders before they're ready. Once you're inside a place like Havenwood, it's harder to fight. They'll say you're confused just for questioning why you're there." Her words chilled me. Havenwood. The very name Samantha had spoken in that voice message. As I left the hospital, clutching the stamped report, the spring air felt sharper than it should. The parking lot stretched wide, but I felt eyes on me. Whether real or imagined, I couldn't tell. Driving home, I replayed Clara's warning. This wasn't just about family betrayal. It was about a system that could be bent if the right signatures appeared on the right forms. Samantha and Victor weren't just plotting against me. They were tapping into a machinery that had already swallowed others. That night, I placed the report into my leather folder alongside the deed, my savings book, and my diary. Each page, each entry, was a stone in the wall I was building between myself and their lies. I lit a candle at the kitchen table, its flame small but steady. In its glow, I whispered to the empty room, "If they want to test my memory, let them. I will remember every word, every moment, every betrayal, and when the time comes, I will show them what memory can do." Paper has always fascinated me. At the library, I handled thousands of pages, brittle parchment from the 19th century, fresh printed novels, student essays written in rushed pencil. Paper carries weight. Paper tells the truth, until someone bends it into a lie. I knew if Samantha and Victor were truly plotting to take my house, their scheme would pass through the county clerk's office. That was the gate, and Paula Denton was its keeper. The Cedar Ridge County Records building sat on Main Street, a squat brick rectangle with a fading sign above the door. I walked toward it, with my leather folder pressed against my ribs, each step firm but measured. Inside, the scent of dust and copier ink lingered. People shuffled at the counter. A farmer with property forms, a young couple registering their deed, a woman clutching a stack of permits. Behind the desk sat Paula Denton. Time had carved only faint lines into her face since high school, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, darting, never resting too long on one thing. She wore her hair in a tight bun and a smile that stretched wide without ever reaching her eyes. When she saw me, her brows lifted. "Mrs. Price?" she said smoothly, as if we were long-lost friends. "It's been years. What can I help you with?" I forced my lips into a polite curve. "I'd like to review my property records. Just to be certain everything is in order." Her hand twitched toward the drawer beside her desk before she quickly redirected it to the keyboard. Of course. That's what we're here for." Her fingers tapped across the keys, but her eyes flicked upward too often, gauging me. I noticed the sheen of sweat at her temple despite the cool air. "I heard Samantha was in here recently," I said casually, leaning just slightly on the counter. The tapping slowed. "Just catching up, you know." Old friends. Old friends don't usually need after-hours visits with files in hand," I replied softly. For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Then she laughed too brightly. "You've always had such a curious nature, Mrs. Price." She slid a paper toward me. "Here's a copy of your deed." Still in your name, safe and sound, I examined the page. My name printed neatly, my signature clear, the seal intact. But the very smoothness of it unsettled me. It was too perfect, like a mask, hiding what had already been altered in shadows. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my folder. "Thank you, Paula." It's reassuring to know everything is where it should be. Paper can shift hands so easily these days. Her smile faltered just slightly. As I turned to leave, a man in a work jacket stepped up behind me. He greeted Paula with a grin. "If anyone can make paperwork smooth, it's you, Paula. You've saved me more than once." She laughed again, brushing it off, but I caught the faint flush in her cheeks. Words spoken in jest often reveal more than confessions whispered in the dark. I walked out into the sunlight, my pulse pounding. I hadn't cornered her, not yet. But I had seen the tremor, the hesitation, the protective flicker of her hand toward that drawer. Paula Denton was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. That night, at my kitchen table, I spread my growing collection of papers. The deed copy, the hospital report, my diary entries, the recording of Samantha's voice message. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. Still, unease gnawed at me. Paula's smile was not that of a friend or even a clerk, doing her job. It was the smile of someone who believed she had the upper hand, who thought she was clever enough to weave lies from paper without anyone noticing. I wrote in my diary, "She smiles as though paper is hers to command, but she has forgotten. I know how to read pages more closely than most. She will slip, and when she does, I will be there." The next morning, I woke to the sound of Victor's car in my driveway. He carried a box into my house without knocking, without asking. I watched from the window, heart tight, as Samantha followed behind him. They were moving themselves in, one item at a time, as though my home were already theirs. I gripped the edge of the curtain, steadying myself. Let them think they were winning. Let Paula smile her counterfeit smile. I was building my arsenal in silence. And silence, I knew, could be louder than any shout. It's a peculiar thing, watching your home change hands without a single paper signed. One day, my house still smelled of lemon polish and old books. The next, it carried the faint musk of Victor's aftershave and the powdery perfume Samantha favored. They didn't announce it, not properly. They arrived with a few boxes, calling it temporary, just until the painters finished work at their apartment. But from the first day they set their things down, I could feel the balance shift. Victor claimed the dining table as his office, scattering invoices and bank statements across the polished wood where I once set out birthday cakes. Samantha filled the hallway closet with her coats, displacing mine into a box she tucked away in the attic. My bedroom door was the only space left untouched, though I noticed Samantha pause outside it more than once, her hand brushing the knob as if testing whether the sanctuary could one day be opened. "Mum, this arrangement is perfect," she said cheerfully over breakfast. "You'll have company, and we'll be here to help with things around the house." Help. The word curdled in my stomach. At first, I told myself to endure it. I cooked, I cleaned. I smiled when Samantha complimented the meals. But beneath the pleasantries, I felt the small displacements piling up. My teacups vanished from the cabinet, replaced with white mugs she insisted were modern. Victor disconnected my landline phone, saying it was outdated, and handed me a mobile device I barely knew how to use. Simpler this way, he said. Simpler for him, perhaps. Harder for me. One evening, I returned from a walk to find my mother's photograph missing from the mantel. Samantha waved away my question. Oh, I put it in the attic. The frame was old and didn't match the decor. The decor. As if my memories were wallpaper to be stripped and replaced. The gaslighting grew thicker, like fog creeping through every room. Mom, you left the stove on again, Samantha said one night, her brow furrowed. But I remembered turning it off, felt the click of the knob still in my fingertips. You misplaced the electricity bill, Victor added another day. I found it in the drawer where it always lived, but his smirk told me the point wasn't accuracy. The point was doubt. Each time they said it, I wrote it down in my diary. Date, time, exact words. I refused to let their fog seep into my memory. The day Victor installed the smart lock was the day I realized they no longer pretended this was my house. He stood by the door, proud as though unveiling a gift. Everyone gets their own code now, he announced. Much safer. No more fumbling with keys? He handed me mine, a string of digits scribbled on a slip of paper. That night, when I tried it, the door beeped red, locked out. My brass key, the one I had carried for decades, jammed uselessly in the slot. I had to knock until Victor opened with a grin. Technology takes getting used to, he said, patting my shoulder. But the truth was clear. My key no longer opened my own house. I tried, once, to reclaim the space. I set the dining table with my old china, my mother's embroidered cloth spread across the surface. Samantha entered the room, frowned, and quietly folded it away. Mum, you'll ruin this fabric using it every day. Best to keep it safe. Safe, I thought bitterly, meant hidden. Safe meant silenced. That night, I dreamed of my mother, sewing by lamplight, her voice steady. Eleanor, houses are built of wood and brick, but homes are built of memory. Don't let anyone steal yours. I woke with her words ringing like scripture. The tension reached its peak during Sunday dinner. I had cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, peas. The sort of meal that once brought Samantha running to the table as a child. We bowed our heads for grace, and I added a quiet prayer. May truth guard this house. Victor chuckled, sipping his wine. Eleanor, this place is far too much for you to handle. The roof leaks, the plumbing groans. You'd be better off somewhere smaller, comfortable. Leave the big responsibilities to us. Samantha nodded quickly, eyes too bright. He's right, Mum. You deserve to rest. We'll manage everything, I smiled, carving the chicken with steady hands. Perhaps. But rest doesn't mean surrender, their forks stilled. For a moment, silence hung thick as smoke. Then Samantha forced a laugh, changing the subject. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the way she understood. I wasn't folding as easily as she'd hoped. Later, when the dishes were cleared and they retired to the guest room they now called ours, I sat at my study desk. I opened my diary, noting every word, every glance, every manipulation. Then I slid the page into my folder with the hospital report and the deed. Each document was a brick. Each record was mortar. And slowly, silently, I was building a fortress they could not breach. For now, the house had two masters. or so they thought. But only one of us knew its true heartbeat, its true history, its true soul. And that one was me. By the time another week had passed, I realized something plain. If Samantha and Victor were treating my house as theirs already, then soon enough they would try to put it on paper. And if the paper shifted, my words alone wouldn't matter. I needed someone who understood the language of courts, the weight of documents, the hidden levers of law. That someone, I decided, was Daniel Brooks. I hadn't seen Daniel in years. He had once been a shy boy who spent hours in the library, poring over puzzle books while I shelved novels. He had grown into a man with a reputation for precision, not flashy like other lawyers, but careful, methodical, respected. People said he didn't take cases unless he believed in them. When I called his office, the secretary hesitated until I gave my name. Then her voice brightened. "Mr. Brooks says he remembers you well, Mrs. Price." "He can see you this afternoon," I hung up, heart pounding. To be remembered felt like a small blessing. Daniel's office was neat, every book aligned, every folder labelled. A chessboard sat on a side table, pieces mid-game. When he rose to greet me, I saw streaks of grey at his temples, but his handshake was firm, his eyes steady. "Mrs. Price," he said warmly, "I used to owe half my love of books to you. Please sit. Tell me why you're here?" I placed my leather folder on his desk. My voice shook only once. "Because my daughter is trying to erase me." I showed him the hospital report first. Clara's neat signature, the stamp, the flawless scores. Then the voice message, Samantha's cold tone playing through the small recorder. Then the diary entries, each date and incident carefully noted. Daniel listened without interruption, his face unreadable, only his pen scratching across a yellow legal pad. When the recording ended, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You've brought me more evidence than most clients do after months," he said. "This isn't paranoia, Mrs. Price. This is a pattern, and it's dangerous." He tapped the hospital report. "This proves you're lucid. That alone is a shield. But paired with the recording and your diary, it becomes a sword." Relief flooded me, tempered by fear. But what if Paula alters the records? What if the deed changes before I can stop it? Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Then we move quickly. First, secure your identity. Passport, license, social security card. Keep them somewhere only you know. Second, freeze your credit and create new bank accounts they cannot touch. Third, keep all your evidence with strict chain of custody. Dates, times, signatures. Courts love precision." He paused, studying me. "You were always meticulous. That will be your greatest strength." Now I nodded, my throat tight. "They think I'm weak." His lips curved faintly. "Then let's use their arrogance against them." I told him about Paula, about Teresa's suspicions, about Victor's boxes in my house, and the smart lock that jammed for me but opened smoothly for them. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Paula Denton is vulnerable," he said. "Clerks live and die by their reputations. If she's caught bending records, she'll take the fall before she takes prison. We can use that pressure." He made another note, then looked up. "Mrs. Price, this isn't just a family quarrel. This is fraud, and fraud leaves fingerprints." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to safety. Not safety in the sense of being protected, but safety in having a plan. Daniel was not swayed by Samantha's smile or Victor's charm. He saw the lines beneath the polish, the ink behind the mask. When I left his office, he walked me to the door. "Remember," he said, "you don't win by shouting louder. You win by being quieter, sharper, and more patient than they ever expected. His words sank deep, echoing the lessons I had lived all my life. I had survived by being steady, by cataloguing details others overlooked. Now those same habits would defend me. That night, back at my kitchen table, I wrote in my diary. Today I found my strategist. They think I'm cornered, but corners can sharpen into blades. Upstairs, I heard Victor's laugh rumbling through the walls, Samantha's voice low in response. I closed my eyes, listening. They believed the house was theirs already, but they didn't know that war had been declared in silence, and I had just chosen my general. There are names that taste bitter even when spoken aloud. Havenwood was one of them. Samantha had whispered it in that voice message, Victor had echoed it like a promise, and Nurse Clara had warned me of it in hushed tones. It wasn't just a building to them. It was a trap, waiting with polished floors and locked doors. If they were preparing to send me there, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I dressed that morning in my soft grey coat and a scarf my mother once knit. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I wanted to look like a woman weighing her options, perhaps a little weary, but still capable of making decisions. Not a victim. Not yet. The lobby of Havenwood greeted me with a mural of wildflowers and a vase of fresh lilies on the counter. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, disguised with lavender spray. A young receptionist beamed at me, her smile so rehearsed it almost squeaked. "Good morning. Are you here for a tour?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm, considering my options for the future. Her eyes lit up as she picked up a clipboard. "Of course. We'll have someone show you around. You'll love it here." That word, love, landed like a stone. When the door opened, I nearly gasped. Standing there in scrubs, badge clipped neatly to her collar, was Nurse Clara James. "Mrs. Price," she said, surprise flickering in her eyes before she masked it with professionalism. "I didn't realize you were exploring." I met her gaze steadily. "Just gathering information." The receptionist handed her the clipboard. "You can take this one, Clara." "Show her the best we've got." Clara gave a quick nod. "Of course." We walked down gleaming hallways lined with framed photographs of seniors gardening, painting, smiling at family picnics. The pictures looked staged, their cheerfulness forced. "This is the dining hall," Clara said for the receptionist's benefit. Her tone was bright, practiced. But as soon as we stepped away from the open door, she leaned closer, voice low. "Be careful. They already have a file started with your name." My chest tightened. "You've seen it?" "An empty folder for now, just your name on the tab. But that means someone requested it. Once admissions begins filling it in, it becomes harder to stop." I clutched my purse tighter. My daughter had not only imagined my confinement, she had already carved a space for me in this place. Clara kept her expression neutral as she guided me into the activity hall, where a handful of residents sat staring at a muted television. One woman shuffled cards on a table, alone. Another man gazed at the window, his eyes vacant. "They tell families there are activities every day," Clara whispered, "but most of the time, people sit waiting. Once they're labelled in care, their voices lose weight." We moved on to the bedrooms. Each one was identical. A small bed, a dresser, a chair by the window. Bare, efficient, impersonal. I tried to imagine my bookshelves here, my mother's photograph, my diaries. They didn't fit. They never could. In the physical therapy room, Clara bent to adjust a strap on one of the machines, her lips barely moving. "There's a loophole they use. Families can sign preliminary admissions for safety. even without the elder's full consent. By the time the resident realizes, the papers are already filed. I've seen it too many times. I swallowed hard. And once inside? Her eyes darkened. Then the burden of proof shifts. You'd have to prove you're competent while already being called incompetent. It's like trying to climb out of a hole with people shoveling dirt in after you. A shiver ran down my spine. The receptionist popped her head into the hall. Everything going well, Clara? Perfect, Clara answered smoothly, her professional smile flashing. Then she turned back to me, her gaze fierce beneath the calm. Don't let them put you here, Mrs. Price. If they're preparing the file, they'll push harder soon. At the end of the tour, Clara handed me a glossy brochure. On the cover was a photograph of an elderly woman watering flowers, her smile wide, her eyes hollow. Inside, slogans promised peace of mind, dignity in care, family you can trust. I thanked Clara aloud, thanked the receptionist for her time, and stepped back into the spring sunlight. The sky looked bluer than it should have, the air crisper. I hadn't realized how heavy the building felt until I walked out of it. I held the brochure all the way home, not because I believed its lies, but because it was another piece of evidence, another paper for my folder. That evening, I laid it beside the deed copy, the hospital report, my diary, and the recording of Samantha's voice. My arsenal was growing. Each page was a brick, each record a stone. They thought they were leading me blindly toward Havenwood, but I had walked its halls. I knew the cage they had built for me, and now I knew how to avoid its door. I wrote in my diary before bed. They already have a room waiting, but I will be the one who chooses where I live, not them. Then I blew out the lamp, the words still burning in my mind like embers. There is an old saying my mother used to whisper when company came. Set the table with care, for truth has a way of slipping between the silverware. I thought of her words as I laid out plates on the dining table that Sunday evening. To Samantha and Victor, it would look like a mother's desperate attempt at peace. But in truth, it was a stage, and I was the one writing the script. I roasted chicken with rosemary, Samantha's childhood favourite, mashed potatoes whipped smooth, and a peach cobbler cooling on the counter. The tablecloth was one my mother embroidered decades ago, the flowers faded but still dignified. Candles flickered, throwing shadows across the walls. And hidden in plain sight, tucked near the mantel clock, was my small recorder, its faint red light blinking like a heartbeat. When Victor entered, he sniffed the air approvingly. Well, Eleanor, this smells like Thanksgiving. His smirk carried that familiar arrogance, as though every gift I offered was owed to him. Samantha followed, her perfume trailing, her smile polished. Mum, you didn't need to go to such trouble. You'll tire yourself out. I smiled warmly, though my chest felt tight. It's no trouble. Tonight is important. They sat, plates filled, wine poured. I bowed my head for grace, speaking slowly, deliberately. May this house be guarded by truth, may kindness guide us, and may love, if it still lives here, show itself tonight. When I lifted my eyes, Samantha was fidgeting with her napkin. Victor cleared his throat, hiding a smirk. They didn't realize yet that prayers can be daggers. Dinner began with chatter about Victor's work, Samantha's errands, and small talk too rehearsed to be genuine. I listened, nodded, ate slowly. All the while, the recorder captured every sound. Halfway through, Victor leaned back, patting his stomach. Eleanor, you really outdid yourself. But don't you think meals like this are too much at your age? You'll wear yourself down. Samantha placed her hand on his arm, laughing lightly. Mom just likes to keep busy. She's restless if she isn't fussing over something. I sipped my tea, keeping my voice steady. Restless, perhaps, but not too tired to notice when things go missing. They froze for just a moment, eyes flicking to each other. Then Samantha forced a laugh. "You always have such a way with words, Mom." But I had seen it. The flicker of panic, the glance exchanged. The mask had cracked, even if only for a heartbeat. When I rose to fetch the cobbler, I passed behind Victor's chair. His phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up. For the briefest instant, I saw the message preview. Paula, signatures ready Friday. I kept my face calm as I returned with dessert, though my pulse pounded in my ears. "Who was that?" I asked lightly, as though making small talk. Victor grabbed the phone too quickly. Work. Always work. Samantha's smile stiffened. "Mum, you don't need to worry about that." I nodded, setting cobbler slices before them. "You're right." I don't need to worry. I only need to remember silence pressed thick between us until the clink of forks broke it. But the recorder had captured everything. My prayer, their uneasy laughter, the mention of signatures, the tension in their voices. Later, when the dishes were washed and they retreated to their room, I slipped into the dining room and retrieved the recorder. Its light glowed steady, faithful. I pressed play for a moment, listening to their voices echo back at me. Proof, caught in the ordinary cadence of dinner. In my study, I opened my diary and wrote the details. Victor's phone. Paula. Signatures ready Friday. I described the angle of the screen, the exact phrasing, the time. Every detail mattered. Then I tucked the recorder and my notes into the folder with the deed, the hospital report, the glossy Havenwood brochure, and the voice message that had started it all. My fortress grew stronger. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of Samantha as a child. She used to sit cross-legged on the floor while I read her fairy tales, eyes wide with wonder. Her favourite was always the one where the clever peasant outwitted the greedy king, not with force, but with cunning. How bitterly ironic that now I was the clever peasant, and she the greedy sovereign. But just like those old stories, the truth was on my side. And truth, when carefully guarded, is a blade sharper than any lie. There are smiles that conceal nothing, and then there are smiles that guard entire secrets. Paula Denton's belonged to the latter. From the moment I left her counter at the records office, I couldn't shake the image of her hand hovering too long over that drawer, shutting it a little too quickly, as though it contained something fragile or damning. Daniel agreed. "Fraud leaves traces," he told me. "Paper may bend, but it never disappears. If Paula is helping Samantha and Victor, the drawer is where her fingerprints will be." The plan began with timing. The message on Victor's phone had said Friday. That meant signatures were moving, documents being prepared. So on Friday morning, Teresa Monroe and I walked into the county building together, my recorder hidden once more in my purse. The lobby bustled with farmers in overalls, clerks with clipboards, young couples filling out forms. Paula sat at her station, her hair pulled tight, her smile polished. But when she saw me and Teresa approach, I caught the faint twitch of her jaw. "Well, Mrs. Price," she said sweetly. "Back again? You're becoming one of my regulars." "Some of us like to be thorough," I replied, keeping my tone airy. Teresa had questions too. Thought I'd keep her company. Teresa leaned in, her eyes sharp as needles. "Yes, Paula." I was just wondering, how often do people peek at deeds that aren't theirs? Seems like it would be tempting. Paula's fingers froze over the keyboard. She forced a laugh. Oh, everything's secure here. Nothing happens without authorization. But I noticed her hand. There it was again, drifting toward the drawer before she caught herself. Curious? I said softly, because I've heard my deed was accessed recently. After hours, the color drained from her cheeks. She quickly clicked something on the screen. Here's your record, Mrs. Price. Still under your name. Nothing unusual. She printed out another copy, sliding it across the counter with fingers that trembled just slightly. I slipped the paper into my folder, smiling politely. Thank you, Paula. I do like having multiple copies. Paper can change so easily, after all. Her smile faltered. That evening, Daniel called. His audit request had come back. Eleanor, he said, his voice edged with triumph. Your instincts were right. Paula Denton accessed your file at 9:47 p.m. on Tuesday and again at 8:15 p.m. on Thursday. Both after hours, both under her login proof. Clear, time-stamped proof. Then we have her? I whispered. Not yet, Daniel cautioned, but we have her cornered. She'll try to wriggle out. That's when we tighten the net. The tightening came sooner than expected. On Sunday morning, Teresa and I happened to run into Paula outside the grocery store. She was clutching a folder under her arm, papers slipping at the edges. Oh, Paula, Teresa exclaimed, her voice sharp with false sweetness. Working on the Sabbath? Must be important files. Paula laughed too quickly, fumbling with the folder. Just catching up. Nothing serious, but one sheet slipped free, fluttering to the ground. Teresa bent swiftly and snatched it up. Her eyes flicked across the page before Paula could grab it back. A notary seal, a blurred signature line, and my name. Teresa handed it back with deliberate slowness. Careful now. Wouldn't want people to think you're mixing personal errands with county business. Paula's face flushed crimson. She muttered something unintelligible and hurried off, heels clattering against the pavement. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the lamp casting long shadows across my papers. I added a new diary entry. Friday. Paula's drawer. Audit logs confirm after-hours access. Witnessed notary seal with my name. My hand shook as I wrote, not from fear, but from the realization that this was bigger than me. Samantha and Victor had not invented this scheme from thin air. They had plugged themselves into a hidden machinery, a quiet network of forged papers and complicit hands. Paula was not simply a helpful clerk bending rules for an old friend. She was part of something that had likely swallowed other people's lives. And now, through my daughter's betrayal, I had stumbled straight into its center. I closed my diary, sat back, and whispered into the empty room. You thought I was too weak to fight. But you forgot. I know how to read what others ignore. And I will read you, Paula Denton, until every shadow drawer in this county is pulled into the light. For weeks, I had gathered evidence in silence. Samantha's mistaken voice message, Clara's evaluation, the deed copy, Paula's after-hours tampering, Victor's careless text, Teresa's photographs. Each piece was a stone, and together they built a fortress. But a fortress is only useful if you know when to open its gates and let truth march out. Daniel called it the set piece, a carefully staged moment where lies collapse under their own weight. We agreed. Sunday brunch. On Saturday night, I cooked with ritual precision. Cinnamon rolls rising, quiche cooling, coffee beans ground fine. To Samantha and Victor, it would look like a gesture of reconciliation, a mother's peace offering. But beneath the warmth of roasted sugar and butter, I was laying out a courtroom disguised as a dining room. That morning, the house smelled like holidays. Victor came down first, grinning as though he already owned it. "Eleanor, you've outdone yourself." "Smells like a celebration," Samantha followed, her silk blouse pressed, her smile too polished. "Mum, this is lovely." "You didn't need to go to such trouble." "Oh, but I did," I said softly. And then the doorbell rang. I moved quickly before they could rise. At the door stood Daniel Brooks, briefcase in hand, flanked by Officer Kane from the sheriff's office. Beside them was Nurse Clara, holding her stamped report, and Teresa Monroe in her Sunday best, a manila envelope tucked under her arm. "Come in," I said brightly. "You're just in time." Samantha's fork clattered against her plate. Victor's grin faltered. "Mum," Samantha said carefully, "what is this?" "Family brunch," I replied. "With friends?" We gathered around the table. Daniel opened his briefcase and laid out folders in a precise line. "Mrs. Price has asked me to clarify a few matters," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. Victor scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Clarify? This looks like a trial." "In a way it is," Daniel replied. The first folder opened. Clara's report. Daniel slid it across the table. "This evaluation, signed and sealed, proves Mrs. Price is fully lucid. Any claims of confusion are false." Samantha flushed. "We never said—" I cut her off gently. "You said it often. To neighbors, to friends, to doctors. I kept the dates in my diary." Clara's voice was steady. "I can testify to her clarity. She is more precise than half the patients I see in this town." The second folder, the audit logs. Daniel tapped the paper with his pen. "Here is proof that Paula Denton accessed Mrs. Price's deed after hours, using her credentials. Twice in 1 week. Both times linked to communications between her and your family." Victor's jaw tightened. "This is nonsense. Paula was helping us with insurance." Teresa interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. "Funny, then, that I caught you outside the office with Paula, folders under your arm. And funnier still that I have photographs, she laid them on the table. Black and white truth staring back at them." Victor's face twisted. "The third folder. My recorder." Daniel pressed play. The dining room filled with Samantha's voice, cold and unmistakable. "Victor, Paula says the transfer papers will be ready. By next month she'll be in Havenwood, and the house will be ours." The silence afterward was deafening. Victor slammed his fist against the table. "You were supposed to keep that quiet," Samantha hissed. "Be quiet, you fool." "Don't you dare call me a fool." His voice cracked, his mask shattering. Officer Kane rose slowly, his hand resting near his belt. "Enough. This evidence is now under preservation order. Any further tampering will be treated as criminal fraud." The room stilled. Daniel slid the final document forward. A protective trust agreement. "Mrs. Price, if you sign here, your property will be placed beyond unauthorized transfer. No forged signature, no fabricated claim, no clerk's trick will touch it again." My hand did not tremble as I signed. The pen scratched across the paper, steady, deliberate. When it was done, Daniel closed his briefcase. "Thank you for brunch," he said dryly, standing. Clara, Teresa, and Officer Kane followed him out, leaving only the three of us at the table. The cinnamon rolls sat untouched, their sweetness soured. Samantha stared at me, eyes wide with something between fury and shame. "Mom, how could you do this to us?" I set down my pen, meeting her gaze. "How could you do this to me?" She looked away first. That night, I wrote in my diary. Today, I turned my table into a courtroom. Today, I reminded them whose house this is. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking in fear. In Cedar Ridge, appearances are a kind of currency. People trade in smiles, polite words, and the illusion that everything in their lives is orderly and good. For years, Samantha and Victor had cultivated their image like gardeners pruning roses. Polished clothes, friendly waves, bright talk at church. Paula had done the same, wearing her clerk's badge like a shield of respectability. But masks cannot survive once truth begins to seep through the cracks. The morning after the Sunday brunch, the first whispers began. At the grocery store, Mrs. Parker, who once praised Samantha as the most devoted daughter, avoided her in the bread aisle. Later that day, I overheard two men at the hardware store mutter about Victor's shady dealings. By evening, word had spread. Samantha and Victor had tried to strip me of my home, and Paula had bent county records to help them. Cedar Ridge had a way of turning whispers into wildfire. Paula was the first to feel the burn. Suspended from her post, she tried to keep her chin high at the market. But when Teresa Monroe deliberately placed her photographs on the cafe counter, Victor and Paula meeting at dusk, folders in hand, there was no stopping the current. People who once waved to Paula now crossed the street. A mother pulled her child closer when Paula passed, as though dishonesty might be contagious. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered that notary seal with my name, her drawer snapping shut, her smile too wide. Pity has no place when survival is at stake. Samantha's collapse came more quietly. She returned to her job at the insurance office, but her colleagues looked at her differently. Where once they admired her ambition, now they whispered, if she lied about her mother, what else might she lie about? Her polished veneer began to chip. One afternoon, I saw her in town. Our eyes met across Main Street. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little girl who once clutched my hand on her first day of school. But then she looked away, her shoulders stiff, her head held high. A woman clinging to the last threads of dignity. Victor fared worse. At the factory, word of the fraud reached his supervisor. Trust is a fragile thing in small towns, and his demotion was swift. I heard him one evening, his voice carrying through the walls of my house, hissing into his phone. They've ruined everything. That old woman, her damn lawyer, even Alvarez with her camera. We're finished. I sat at my desk, pen in hand, and wrote in my diary. They think I ruined them, but ruin is the fruit of their own planting. At church the following Sunday, the sermon touched on honoring one's parents. The pastor's voice lingered on those words longer than usual. I felt eyes flick toward me, then toward Samantha sitting stiffly 2 pews back. My chest ached, but I did not turn. Afterward, a woman I scarcely knew touched my arm. Eleanor, we're proud of you, she whispered. It takes courage to stand against your own blood when they've wronged you. I nodded, my throat tight. Courage had not felt like choice. It had felt like necessity. Investigator Collins, a stern man with sharp eyes, came to my house that week. He laid his recorder on my table and asked me to recount everything. The voice message, the visits to the clerk's office, the Havenwood file, the Sunday confrontation. My words flowed steady, my evidence laid out in careful order. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Price, you've done more than protect yourself. You've pulled the lid off something rotten in this county. Denton wasn't acting alone. We've already found signs she doctored other records too. A chill ran through me. How many others had been tricked, erased, silenced, while their families looked the other way? That night I sat with Teresa on her porch. She handed me a mug of tea, steam curling into the night air. You know what I think, Eleanor? she said. Your fight isn't just yours anymore. People see what you've done, and they're thinking about their own lives, about their own children, about the papers they've signed without reading. Her words settled in my bones. I hadn't wanted to be a symbol. I had wanted only to survive. But survival, once visible, becomes contagious. Still, danger lingered. One evening I found a note shoved under my door. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. You'll regret this. Families don't survive betrayal. I sat at my table, holding the slip of paper. For the first time in weeks, fear returned. Not fear of losing my home. That battle was won. But fear of what desperate people might do when cornered, their masks stripped, their reputations crumbling. I slipped the note into my folder. Threats reveal desperation, I wrote, and desperation is weakness. By the end of that month, Cedar Ridge no longer spoke of Samantha as the golden daughter, nor of Victor as the charming son-in-law, nor of Paula as the trusted clerk. Their masks had crumbled, their names now spoken with a mixture of disdain and pity. As for me, people greeted me with a new respect. Some nodded quietly, others offered words of encouragement. But I carried myself carefully. Respect earned in the ashes of betrayal is fragile, and I had no intention of letting it define me. Because beneath the town's whispers, I knew this. Masks may crumble, but the scars they leave can shape a life forever. I used to think justice arrived like thunder, loud, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. But when it finally came to me, it crept in quietly, carried on the scratch of pens against paper. No applause, no dramatic pronouncements, just ink pressed into lines that could never be taken back. Daniel arranged the meeting at the courthouse. The conference room was plain. Beige walls, fluorescent lights humming, a long table polished to a dull shine. There were no judges, no juries, no galleries, only 4 people on one side of the table and 3 on the other. On my side sat Daniel, calm as always, his yellow legal pad poised like a shield. Beside him, Investigator Collins, recorder blinking red. And me, Eleanor Price, 64 years old, holding my leather folder like a talisman. Across from us, Samantha, her hair pulled into a bun too tight, shadows under her eyes. Victor, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. Paula Denton, pale and diminished, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her folder. The air was heavy, as though all of Cedar Ridge had crammed into that small room, waiting for truth. Daniel spoke first. We could take this to trial. The evidence is overwhelming. Fraud, coercion, forgery. But my client is willing to resolve this without dragging it through court. On conditions, Victor scoffed. Conditions? You should be grateful we're even here. Samantha hushed him, her voice brittle. What conditions? Daniel slid a document across the table. Restitution of stolen funds, agreement of no further contact, and most importantly, a written confession. Paula's head jerked up. Confession? Collins leaned forward, his voice cold. You've all been caught. The only question is whether the record will show cooperation or defiance. Sign, and you limit the damage. Refuse, and you face a courtroom. Samantha's face twisted. You can't humiliate us like this. I spoke then, my voice steady, though my heart pounded. This isn't humiliation. This is truth, and truth written down cannot be twisted. You wanted to write me out of my own life. Now you will write me back in. Her lips trembled, but she lowered her gaze. The document lay between us, simple and devastating. We, Samantha Price, Victor Hale, and Paula Denton, Acknowledge that we conspired to portray Eleanor Price as mentally incompetent. We admit to attempting to alter her property records through unauthorized means. We confirm that Eleanor Price is of sound mind, fully capable of managing her affairs. Our actions were fraudulent, and we retract every false claim made against her. I watched as Samantha picked up the pen. Her hand shook. For a moment she glanced at me, eyes filled with something between shame and defiance. Then she bent her head and signed. Victor followed, muttering under his breath. His signature was sloppy, angry strokes gouging the paper. Paula hesitated longest, tears pooling in her eyes. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "But it did," I said softly. She nodded, signing with a trembling hand. When the last pen lifted, Daniel gathered the pages, tapped them into a neat stack, and slid a copy to Collins. "There it is." In ink, the room was silent. Samantha stared at the table. Victor glared at the wall. Paula wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I rose slowly, my knees aching, but my back straight. "You thought I wouldn't fight? You thought you could reduce me to a rumor. But I am still here. And this paper," I tapped the confession, "is my proof." Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled across the courthouse steps. Teresa was waiting, her scarf bright against the breeze. When she saw me, she smiled, fierce and proud. "Did they sign?" she asked. "They did," I said. My voice cracked with the weight of it. "Every word." She touched my arm gently. "Then it's over." But I shook my head. "No, it's written. That's not the same as over. Confession is not closure." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the confession before me. I traced my daughter's name with trembling fingers. Samantha Price, signed in ink, binding her lies into truth. Tears blurred my vision. Not tears of triumph, but of grief. I whispered into the quiet. "I never wanted victory, Samantha. I only wanted your love. But since you gave me lies instead, I'll take truth. And truth, at least, cannot betray me." I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my folder, the last stone of my fortress. Then I wrote in my diary, "Justice does not roar. It whispers through ink." It has been a year since ink dried on the confession. A year since Samantha's voice cracked under the weight of her own lies, since Victor signed his name in anger, since Paula's hands trembled as she admitted her part. A year since I carried that paper home and placed it into my leather folder, not as a trophy, but as a safeguard. Time has passed, and yet the memory of that Sunday morning still glows in me, a scar that has stopped bleeding but will never quite fade. My old house belongs to strangers now. After the settlement, I chose to sell it. I thought it would hurt, but it didn't. The house had become a battlefield, its walls echoing with betrayal. I no longer needed to live inside its ghosts. Instead, I bought a smaller bungalow on the edge of town, one with wide windows and a garden where I grow rosemary, the herb Samantha once asked about as a child. Rosemary, for strength. The first night I slept here, I locked the door with my own key. No smart locks, no hidden codes, no one else's hand hovering over my doorknob. Just a brass key, old-fashioned and honest. The click of that lock felt like freedom. My days are quiet, but full. Twice a week, I volunteer at the Silver Lantern Foundation, helping elders review their paperwork and write down their wishes so no one can twist their lives in silence. Some arrive trembling, clutching letters their children have drafted for convenience. Others come with stories of being told they're forgetful, confused, unfit. I listen. I share my own story when needed. And when they ask how I survived, I tell them the truth. I wrote everything down. I gathered proof. And I refused to believe lies about myself. Sometimes I see relief flicker in their eyes. Sometimes I see hope. That, I think, is the only repayment I'll ever need. On Thursdays, Teresa Monroe comes over for tea. She's still as sharp as ever, though her knees creak when she climbs my porch steps. We sit by the window, sipping tea, watching the birds in the garden. She teases me, saying I've become Cedar Ridge's quiet rebel. Imagine, she laughs, all it took was you standing up to your own daughter for the rest of us to question our children's intentions. I shake my head, though a smile tugs at my lips. I never wanted to be anyone's symbol. I just wanted my life back. Sometimes, she says, patting my hand, those are the same thing. Letters still arrive from Samantha. Short, tidy, careful words. She apologizes, promises she's in therapy, writes of regret. I read them, then place them in a drawer I rarely open. Forgiveness? Yes. I've given her that in my heart. But trust? Trust once broken does not grow back the same way. I have not seen Victor since the courthouse. Rumors say he left town after debts piled too high. Paula moved to another county, chasing anonymity, but her name lingers in Cedar Ridge as a warning. When I walk through town now, people greet me with respect. Some nod quietly, others stop to thank me for showing it's possible. Their words humble me, but I remind myself daily, I didn't fight to be remembered. I fought because I refused to disappear. One evening, near the anniversary of the confession, I returned to the old neighborhood. I didn't step inside the house, only stood on the sidewalk. The curtains were different now. The paint a new color. The garden overgrown with toys scattered by children I didn't know. I didn't feel grief. I felt release. That house had once been a cage and a battlefield. Now it belonged to others, as it should. As I turned to leave, the setting sun struck the kitchen window. Light flared, bright and sudden, like a final blessing. For a moment, I imagined the house whispering, "You endured. That is enough." Back at my bungalow, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the table. I opened my diary, the same one that had once held desperate entries of gaslighting and betrayal, and wrote my final note on the matter. I am Eleanor Price. I was nearly erased, but I remain. My daughter's lies crumbled, my home is safe, and though scars remain, I live not in shadows, but in light. They thought my story had ended, but I still hold the pen. I closed the diary, set it beside my novels, and blew out the lamp. The room fell into darkness, but my heart, steady and unbroken, carried its own light.